Right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome inside the Fan Cave. This is the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. I'm Bob Pompeani at 412-575-2600, on Twitter at KDPomp, at Chris Mueller, PGH. Chris is up at 93.7 The Fan, and it is the eve of the waste management, or the wasted management, or maybe not as wasted as in previous years, management golf tournament out in Phoenix. It's one of the more iconic PGA venues now, Chris, because of all the people that go to this event. And that 16th hole is one of the places people want to be, but they've made some modifications to it. Do you think that's the right call on behalf of the golf tournament? Because last year we saw some things we hadn't seen on a golf course ever.
I think there's a pretty fine line, Bob. You and I probably, I think, both have been known to enjoy a drink and a good time or two in our lives. But I think there's a fine line between, like, we're having fun and it's rowdy, but it's, like, under some semblance of control, versus like a true Animal House slop fest, which is what it started to turn into there. Like, that to me is, I'm 39, so I don't want to sound like the old man screaming, "Get off my lawn," but I think there is like a fine line where you can say, like, yeah, it becomes dumb to just have, oh, we're throwing beer bottles everywhere, look at us, ha ha ha, we're so cool, we're so rowdy. Like, you can get pretty good and drunk and scream and yell because they basically encourage you to be loud on that hole and have a good time, but I do think it was time to rein it in a little bit because it was starting to resemble, like, you know what it was starting to resemble? The infield at the Preakness, where people are running on tops of porta-johns and there are, like, fist fights breaking out while the horse racing's going on. So I think you can find a happy medium, and hopefully this sort of sets it back to a good level.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we saw people doing sand angels. We saw people throwing up on even the greens. I mean, at that point, you got to dial it back quite a bit, and I think they have. So we'll see how it goes tomorrow. It's still a good spectacle, and it's a great place to watch golf up close on a par 3 that could be a hole-in-one, on every group. Who knows the way it's going to go out there? I'd like to have a shot at that, wouldn't you? Just one shot to see what you can do from that tee.
I'd like to have one shot at it, but I believe at your excellently run charity event this past June, I was one of the lucky contestants who got to try to fire from like 155, 160 yards.
We were the only like $1 million, Chris. That was $1 million. You had a whole hillside of people watching you.
I know, and even with nobody else around except for the other guys hitting the shots, it was nerve-wracking. Like, I've hit shots in front of 100 people. I cannot imagine standing on that tee box in front of 20,000. Everyone's looking right at you. That would be horrifying.
Yeah, got to get it out of your head, that's for sure. All right, I noticed you guys had, I think I saw Andrew put up a tweet about a guest you had today who was talking about this whole situation after the Jerry Dulac article came out. Aditi Kinkhabwala seemed to refute all of it. Tell us more about that and what she said.
Aditi called it a very, she felt like the sourcing there came from one side of the story and that it was Russell Wilson's side of the story. I had heard through various channels that Arthur Smith was none too happy about the story and voiced his displeasure to some people about the story and about what was implied in the story. And here's my bottom line takeaway. I do think it's pretty obvious that the Steelers, either at Smith's direction or at Mike Tomlin's direction or at Smith's direction with Tomlin's blessing, because they have similar philosophies, went very conservative over the last several games of the season. I don't think, though, that it's an accurate telling that Russell Wilson, because he had some sort of restrictions placed on him, suddenly was unable to do all the things that were making the offense hum. I could go back and probably watch that Cincy game, and I doubt I would see him checking into a bunch of plays that turned into touchdowns. I think it's Russ's just desire here, so I guess I'm painting myself as probably more on the Arthur Smith side, if anything. I think it's Russell Wilson's desire to always have like an excuse or to look like it's not my fault. What I don't get, Bob, and I don't know if you feel the same way about this, is I don't think Russ has really any suitors out there in the NFL. Like, I don't think there are going to be teams lining up to pay him to be their starter, which you know is what he wants, because I don't think he could be a backup somewhere. Mm-hmm. How does suggesting, for a team that, by the way, does not fire coaches under contract, so Arthur Smith's not going anywhere unless he had gotten a job elsewhere as a head coach again, how does Russ think that having him, himself or having his people say this to Jerry and get this out there that he felt like it wasn't working because they put restrictions on him, how does that improve his chances of the Steelers signing him back next year? Like,
Yeah,
I would think that this is Russell Wilson. Well, yeah, he's burning a bridge when I don't think he's got bridges leading to other franchises. So I really don't get this. This seems like a very self-destructive move for a guy that allegedly wants to play like 4 or 5 more years.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And the other thing about him, he's always been, and I did go back and look at that game, and I had some free time, so I wanted to find out, and I counted 21 of his 39 passes that were 5 to 10 yards. And quite frankly, it was just what they were giving him. If you remember, Cincinnati was back in this kind of Tampa 2 way back zone, and every play it seemed like Najee Harris is right in the middle of the field. They just dump it to him and run. And that's fine. You can make a lot of yards that way. Not very smart on Cincinnati's behalf, but it didn't strike me like there were a ton of audibles. And it also, you know, if you look at Russell Wilson's career, he's been very cautious with the football in terms of being aware that he doesn't want to make turnovers. His numbers all time are some of the best in terms of not throwing interceptions, and I think he knows that anyway. You know, that's how he plays. You saw a lot of balls being thrown away to the sideline throughout the course of the year.
Well, he takes sacks, Bob. He takes sacks as a result of that too,
exactly.
because he doesn't like to throw it into any kind of pressure. You know, his best play in that Cincy game, you watched it, so you probably remember it fresh like I do. He moves to his right, he escapes a little trouble, and then he throws on a tight angle to Freiermuth for a really nice touchdown. My recollection is not that he changed the play, it's that he turned back the clock 7 or 8 years and looked like mid-20s Russell Wilson making a play on the run. So I just thought it was a very self-destructive story for Russell Wilson because it is pretty obvious it comes from his camp. And I think that all but, you know, turns down to 0 the chances that he's back as a Steeler next year.
All right, we want to hear from the people on the phone lines, 412-575-2600. What do you think about all this? And Sidney Crosby injury that might have him end a consecutive game streak and hopefully not end a chance of playing in the Four Nations. We'll talk about all that and more as we continue. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. We're here 7 nights a week on KDKA+, and most nights 93.7 The Fan. Our GMC Sierra tweet of the night comes from the Steelers because they remind us on this day in 2006, they won Super Bowl 40, and it was that big 75-yard run there by Willie Parker, made possible because of Max Starks and Alan Faneca, and then cigars and robes in the locker room. What a great night that was in Detroit, and Jerome Bettis' final game. This was also an anniversary date. I think it was 8 years ago that 28-3 vanished right before your eyes, Chris, and Tom Brady won another Super Bowl.
I'll focus on the one that happened when I think coincidentally, I think there was like freezing rain that night too, and I was in North Oakland.
It was terrible.
I was in North Oakland down from Penn State with my buddies to watch the game at a buddy's place who went to Pitt. Quite a jubilant party in the streets. I may or may not have turned 21 yet, maybe not, but may have been enjoying and imbibing some alcohol and watching that. And I don't know, Bob, I remember this. I don't know how you feel if this is the way you look at some of those games, but I still remember like the picture of the room, like the house that I was in, who was where of my friends, who was doing what when Parker hits that run. I'm kind of bummed out thinking about it only because it feels like they are very far off from having another moment like that. But I can remember, you know, that's what is that, 19 years ago?
19 years ago, yeah.
19 years ago,
They had us up in the upper deck. There was an overflow media, so we had these seats, these media seats that were way up high in an end zone, and that was the run that came right toward us. So you can actually see it from that, and that's, you know, all 22 tape. That's where they do it up there, where you can actually see plays develop. In that play, it didn't take long for it to develop because Starks and Faneca cleared the way, and then it was just a foot race.
That was one of the rare plays. You're right about that, by the way, the all-22 view. That side profile shot does not like actually show people the correct gaps in blocking, but that was one of the few times where on a play like that, you could actually see, even in real time, oh my, this is going to be at least like 15, 20 yards. And then when you realize it's Parker and somebody takes a bad angle, well, then you're like, well, that's going to be a touchdown because that's one of the fastest guys in the NFL. Still just an awesome moment, an incredible run by them. Still an historic run, Bob. They can always say they're the first 6 seed to ever go 4 in a row to win it all.
Yeah, with the white uniforms. And not only that, Willie Parker's 75-yard touchdown run, still the longest in Super Bowl history, although there's a man named Saquon Barkley who would love to do that against the Kansas City team on Sunday. We'll see how that goes. 412-575-2600. Let's go out to Josiah in San Antonio, who joins us on line 2 tonight. Hello, Joe. What's up?
Bob, hey, Chris. Bob, I want to dispute Andrew's point the other day when he was on with you. He was saying that the Steelers need to go back in the draft. I agree. I don't want Russell Wilson, but they do need to resign Justin Fields. No, we're not winning the Super Bowl anytime soon, but I don't want to be chasing this quarterback issue for time after time. And I know Fields is still young. Give him time to grow. And I had one more point real quick with the NBA. I heard you guys talking the other day, too. They said that Jimmy Butler goes to Golden State. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm kind of glad it's over with Miami. Him and Pat Riley going back and forth. Pat doesn't want to trade him. Then he finally gets his wish. And I was just wondering your take on this whole Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I think that's good. It just happened tonight, Jimmy Butler. Then he signed a 2-year, $121 million extension. You know, they traded – I understand why they wanted him, but I also know they traded Andrew Wiggins away. He's a pretty good player, and he's been hot of late from the outside. But they wanted a game changer. And if you remember, Chris, during the Miami Heat runs to finals, I mean, it was Jimmy Butler carrying a lot of what they did. So the question is, does he have that in him again with that team? You still have Draymond, you still have Curry, you still have pieces, Kuminga and others, but that's the expectation meter just went up big time.
He's a guy, I think, who what he brings to them is he's still dangerous enough. I think what you're saying is how dangerous is he getting to the rim and being sort of a player who plays not just the old, I'm going to camp out by the three-point line. He's still a rim attack guy.
Yep.
If he can do that pretty well, then he spaces the floor in the process for Curry and makes them pretty dangerous. But you're right about Wiggins, pretty versatile player. You know what I think is the great part of this? Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green on the same team? We could have an actual boxing match break out. Those are not exactly two shrinking, violent personalities.
Well,
here, Bob. You got two alpha dogs.
Draymond took on, who was it, Poole, and he hit him in the face at practice?
Jordan Poole in the face. Yes, Jordan Poole, not exactly an alpha personality. Jimmy Butler would not suffer that.
I'll say this about Poole. He's timed it right. He got a big contract after one really good season, and they paid, and hasn't been the same.
He stinks.
Exactly. Let's go out to Mr. Brown in Braddock. Hello, Mr. Brown. He's timed it right. He got a big contract after one. Oh, Mr. Brown.
Oh, no.
No, we'll give you another chance. A mulligan, call back. Turn your television down, though. Do that, okay? Let's go out to John in Castle Shannon. Hello, John.
Hi, Bob. How are you, sir?
What's up?
So, anyway, sir, what do you think? Either Russell, Wilson, or Fields? What do you think?
I think it's going to be Fields.
Either one of them. What about somebody else? God bless.
God bless you, too. Chris, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Just listening to Art a few times, it seems to me they were kind of leaning in that direction anyway. It makes more sense. There is a chance he can unlock some talent that he may have. Justin Fields, I think there is another level to get to. Whether or not he gets there is another story, but at least he's young enough where you can have somebody for that reason, plus his legs, and then try to figure out your next move.
Art also said it doesn't get played very often, the full quote from Art in his season-ending address, but when he was asked about the quarterback position, he said age would be a consideration. Mm-hmm. Tell me, Bob, how many times in almost any job does the 37-year-old win out over the 26-year-old, all things are being equal, when age is a consideration? Not very often, so...
Yeah, and I don't even think things are going to be equal, because I think Wilson wants more money than Fields would want. Or get.
I think you're right about that. The one other thing I didn't say when we kind of got into the Wilson Jerry Dulac story at the beginning of the show here is this. The fact that Wilson has this out there now, and it should be pretty obvious to anybody on the outside that the Steelers have a fractured relationship with him, should make it pretty easy for Justin Fields to up his price a little. Like, oh, what are you going to do? Bring that guy back? He doesn't want to work with the offensive coordinator. That's not going to work out. So I do think it makes it a little more expensive potentially to sign Fields to like a 2-year deal if that's what they want to do.
Well, here's the wild card in this whole situation. Let's say Fields gets another offer somewhere. I don't know where that would come from, but let's say he's serious about taking it and eventually does. Then what do? They go back to Russell Wilson, or, they got to do something to have a quarterback play this year.
I mean, I don't know what you do at that point. You can't. What are you going to do? Tell Wilson, hey, you're getting 1 year from us, and or we'll say it's 2 years, but the second one's a complete lame duck situation. I do have a weird feeling that Fields doesn't want to keep jumping, Bob, from team to team because of the way his time in Chicago went. So, and he also, I've not heard a bad word about Fields, the person or the teammate.
Right.
I actually think that even though it might be a little more expensive than they would otherwise want it to be, I think Justin Fields probably does want to stay here because there's some modicum of stability for him.
Yeah, and that's something unusual. I think he liked this year. Got to watch, got to learn on the job, got some experience, and I think maybe it's a reset. He needs it. We'll see. We got to take a break. 412-575-2600. You're watching the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.